Hello, I'm Kai Rosga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. What is a legal quant? On the pod today to answer that question is Jamie Tso. Jamie, who is a practicing lawyer, is not a software engineer, but he does identify as a legal quant. That's a term he coined to describe a small but growing group of lawyers who use the latest in AI to build small and usable solutions to everyday problems they encounter in their practice. But this isn't a hobby. Jamie believes legal quants like himself will transform what it means to be an elite practitioner by leveraging AI to design their own weapons for achieving the best outcomes for their clients. So he's created a community of like-minded practitioners to meet, exchange ideas, problem solve, and, most importantly, build things. The driver for this is curiosity and growth, but it's also market realities. AI sets a new baseline. Lawyers who generate work product that is no better than AI-generated output will lag behind. Lawyers who use AI to make better, quicker decisions for their clients will race ahead of those who do not. Legal quants and other lawyers who are AI fluent will be the fulcrums for this transformation, and they'll gain professionally and be rewarded financially for it. It's a fascinating vision of the future of AI in the practice and business of law. I had a great time talking to Jamie about it. I hope you enjoy the episode. Jamie Tso, welcome to Version Up.
Thank you for having me, Kai.
Very excited to have you. Jamie, you still are a practicing lawyer, right?
Yeah. I am a funds lawyer in Hong Kong, so I do practice law. I mostly do fund formation work. That means advising managers on formation of their funds and also certain investors in connection with their investment in certain PCOP funds. So that's my bread and butter. But recently I found a lot of interest at building stuff using AI. And that is something that I've been doing actually when I was a trainee, but then we didn't have AI back then. So what I did was I had some really painful workflows that I want to automate. So I actually reached out to some engineers that I can find on Upwork to try to see if we can build some solutions to automate that using some information and materials that we can locate online. So we built some small language models using BERT and TensorFlow back then, but it didn't go anywhere. And I'm glad that it didn't go anywhere because GPT came out, right? And it would have wiped out all the efforts. So when GPT came out, I started looking at this more closely and found, a lot of success just applying AI in all areas of life. And quite recently, I have been building solutions that I feel are of tremendous value to legal work. That include the tablet review, like contract simulator, and then some signature pad collator. So these are the things that I've built using AI.
I understand that you've also started a community of people like you called Legal Quants. Can you tell me about Legal Quants?
So it started off as a WhatsApp group when I first started vibe coding certain solutions and building their own tools and tagging me in their posts. So I have always felt pretty lonely in this journey because I feel like, oh, am I the only one building stuff? I was so surprised to see other people actually coming out of the closet, for lack of a better word, to show the world that, well, we've been building stuff in stealth as well. So I kind of reached out to them saying that, wait, we should talk because I felt like I found my tribe. Then I put these people together and opened a WhatsApp group. They were just like 5 to 8 people at first. And then we should exchange hundreds of messages per day. Being part of that community, I've learned so much from them that I felt like I've upskilled myself 10x and brought myself to the frontier of legal tech immediately. So I kind of grew that community by inviting more people like me to join in because people have been tagging me in their post. And one thing led to another. I feel that, well, since we have this community, then we should formalize it. So I reached out to Manus, which is like a frontier lab that is building general AI agents. I've used Manus to vibe code certain apps, and I feel it could be a good fit for lawyers who need a lower barrier to entry to experience vibe coding. So I reached out to Tim saying that, well, can you give me 30 free accounts so that I could give them out so that I can find more people like us so that we can, create a community. So I did that. And within a week, we've got like 20 different apps that people have built using those accounts. That's the moment I felt we need to kind of formalize this. So that's how I founded the Legal Quants. The position is really simple. We want to find out all the lawyers just like me, all the lawyers that are at the frontier, building AI solutions using state-of-the-art technology. We try to differentiate ourselves from the average AI user because we love just building with whatever is the latest and greatest. And I think that is what defines legal quants. So yeah, that's how we got here.
What you describe sounds like a very organic process from the ground up of like-minded lawyers coming together and exchanging ideas, which all makes me think of Web 1.0 growing up. I don't know how far back you want to go, but I can go back pretty far. And I remember internet-related chat. I remember first iterations of websites running on HTML 1.0. And there was a moment in time there where the internet felt very democratic. And I don't mean that in a political way. I mean, it felt very open and something where individual people would create things and put them out into the world. That's kind of what you make me think of when you're describing this moment that you're finding yourself in.
I personally not experienced a Web 1.0 moment. I wonder how it would feel like. But yes, it is completely organic. And looking back, I feel the reason why we grew so quickly is because there was never an environment where lawyers can just openly talk about their experiments with AI. And for myself, I felt pretty lonely in that process because, well, I feel like we got to admit that not many people have the appetite to spend hours just experimenting stuff. And not many people actually want to go several levels deeper to figure out how things work. And I felt like I was that nerd who loved to just use AI to try to do fun stuff. And the first thing that I built and vibe coded is actually my wife's clinic website. I was using Replit at that time, a little bit of Manus, and it was just amazing. Like looking at how AI can simply code up at the entire front end, and which does a much better job than if you find a freelancer on Upwork. So that was the aha moment for me. So I kept going and tried to apply the same mentality to building legal tech products. So I think the kind of journey is a shared experience among all the legal quants within our community. When I was talking to Arthur, which is a core member of our group, just earlier today, and he wrote a great article and posted it on our legal quants blog, which kind of outlines how he got into vibe coding and how he got more and more proficient. And that kind of article resonates deeply within our community because that's the shared experience that we have. So yeah, I think that is why I think the group grew pretty quickly and was pretty active and still is. Yeah.
I'm not yet, at least, too deep in the vibe coding scene myself, but I can speak for having been a practicing lawyer, still a practicing lawyer. I can't remember a time when I found a community of people who really were looking for a place to connect and to share ideas. And by and large, the legal industry can be a series of islands people put themselves on. And it's really nice to see and enter a space like legal tech where I'm just experiencing a lot more of those bridges connecting everyone and really looking out for each other and really being inspired by each other. I think it's a great moment. And I'm happy that you saw this moment, seized it, and have created a community of your own. That's great.
Yeah, I feel that the main utility legal quants get out of this community is that it's a safe place to experiment, to share knowledge, and to learn from each other. The moment where we found each other, it's quite phenomenal because we felt like we were the only one tinkering with stuff. And to be frank, I have only seen different legal tech startups, you know, being mentioned in different press releases. I've tried a couple of them, and I feel like lawyers are the kind of missing piece of that equation. Lawyers are traditionally being handed down those tools, but they're in the trenches trying to pick the best weapon to do their work. But then they were never in that discussion. They were never really involved in the design of the tools. Because previously, what happens is that, well, if you have a pain point, then you kind of look into the market to see whether there is someone who already has built something that kind of solves a little part of your problem. Then when you actually try it, you find that, well, it's actually not the best fit. But then today, what happens is that, lawyers can be in the driver's seat. They can design their own weapon. They can basically build something on the fly that they can use that's fit for purpose. So that's extremely empowering. So I think that is what is actually quite new to me.
Yeah, taking lawyers out of a wait and see posture and allowing them to be more proactive. What
Yeah.
are the current limitations in the technology or in the infrastructure that would prevent your typical lawyer from doing this in their day-to-day practice? From a security standpoint, from a confidentiality standpoint, or any other perspective? What are the limiters, barriers you would love to see continue to drop if really this was to be something that the average lawyer would be doing in their practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The way I think about the use of AI is that you don't necessarily need to put a distinction between different kinds of outputs of an AI. I mean that in the sense that before vibe coding, before people are using coding agents to build software, people are using AI as a chatbot. You will have text input and text output. But then people discovered that, well, LLM is actually pretty good at writing codes. So the codes come packaged and compiled into apps. So it becomes an artifact of an LLM based on a text prompt. So of course there are security issues related to the codes that are generated by the LLM, but fundamentally I see that as an extension of how you would use AI. If it's a text output, then there's certain security issues related to it or confidentiality. Things like do not put in client confidential information into the AI when you're talking to the chatbot, and do verify that the text output is actually free of hallucinations. But then, obviously, if we move towards using AI to build software, I think another set of issues would arise. But I would see that as expansion of the inherent risk of using AI. It's less about vibe coding as a separate category. So I would say precisely because it's an extension of that inherent risks, I see that ultimately the frontier labs would be most interested in making it safe for everyone. And by way of example, we see that Claude they have recently published a security scanner that helps people scan their vulnerabilities of the codes that are generated by Claude, because they acknowledge that one of the risks of using AI, to the extent you are using AI to generate codes, is that it might be using certain libraries that contain certain vulnerabilities. It might be using copyleft codes. So I see that these are risks that would eventually become mitigated by the frontier labs. Of course, there are also other limitations. For example, from a technical perspective, you can never vibe code a Litera compare engine. You can never vibe code a word processor, like at this stage. You cannot vibe code a next generation docs formats. You cannot vibe code, a GitHub for lawyers. The reason for that is because these are infrastructure problems. These are problems that still requires hardcore engineering. But then for known issues, for known problems that there are already existing solutions for, then you can easily use AI to piece together a different combination of the same codes to solve a specific issue. So I think that's the power of vibe coding. Yeah, of course, it has its own limitations from a security and also infra standpoint.
It's interesting how you put that, because what you're describing is your community is really the coders and users of some of these solutions, but that the technical obstacles or technical challenges are really at such a level of complexity and scale that we do need to sort of wait until the frontier labs, for example, come in and solve some of those problems. So we need to be thoughtful in how we use these tools to vibe code in the meantime, but really are going to need to count on someone higher up the value chain, let's say, to really build out that infrastructure in a way that gives us that higher level of security. Is that the idea?
Yeah, the main point that I want to make is that it is not unsolvable, and it is within the frontier labs radar.
Yeah.
So I see that there are a lot of criticisms made towards vibe coders. Most of these criticisms surround for topics like scalability, maintenance, security, and so on. And I think it's fair to say that the vibe coding platforms themselves definitely will solve these problems, because to expand their market and the users, they definitely need to, as in their interest, to actually solve these things.
It drives usage, right? So
Drives usage.
even looking outside of legal, you don't have to spend much time on social media to see people posting how a vibe coding tool took control of their terminal and started doing something with their personal data they didn't want to have done. Same idea,
Yeah,
right? Like the frontier
exactly.
labs are all over that. They want to be, because they don't want users to have that experience. They want users to feel comfortable in using their technology. So
Exactly.
that makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
And we also see a lot of success stories with vibe coded apps as well. If you look at the hackathons that Replit and Lovable are doing, and I love the kind of hackathon that Lovable did before, which say that, don't forget about the software, just make, it's like 10K MRR to see if whoever gets to 10K MRR first wins the hackathon. And you need to use Lovable to build that app that makes you that money. Like, there's no better way to measure real life impact, making money out of a vibe coded app, right? So I feel if it doesn't work, if it is not maintainable, if it's not scalable, if it's not trustworthy, if it's not usable, then it won't make money. I think that's the logic, I guess, if it's not solving a real life issue. So from my point of view, I see it as, are you advancing the GDP? If you're making a positive contribution to the GDP, then there is value in it. And from Lovable's point of view, they definitely want their apps to be as secure as possible. So I can give you an example. Lovable, they have a security scanner that you need to mandatorily run before you publish the app. It kind of scans your code base to look for security flaws. They will say, oh, your database is not secure. Anyone can write it or edit it. So that's something that they will flag. For Replit, and I can have a disclaimer, I didn't get any sponsors from them, but it's just from my observation. For Replit, if you are a Teams subscriber, then basically the kind of enterprise or lightweight enterprise version, they can help you get your app into SOC 2 territory and ISO 27001. So it is something they are aware of and are actually solving. And I can give you another example like Manus. So one of the issues of iPod apps is, well, how do you share it? Like, is data isolated for each user? So for Manus, for each iPod app, you can actually bolt on these kind of multi-tenant user authentication modules. So you don't need to even think about it. Once you build it, then each user using your app, they will need to log in with their own accounts, and they will have a database provision for them. So I would say these are the kind of things that DeFi platforms, they are already thinking about. They already take active steps to solve them. So down the road, we'll see that, these kind of problems helping Vibe apps become more and more mature.
It does flag an important consideration for people to be aware of if they're going to engage in vibe coding, right? So it really requires a level of sort of fluency of these tools and what the implications of using these tools are, what they can or cannot do, which to me suggests, okay, right now, this is something that a small group of people are going to do. They're going to help us figure out how to do it, and they're going to push these frontier labs or these other providers to develop these features and build out the infrastructure to make it more secure so that one day the rest of us can hop on the train and not have to have that fluency and not have to have that expertise and understanding that you just set out. And we'll be able just to use it the way that, maybe you download an app from your phone. Is that sort of the ideal future state?
It could be. It could be. I think vibe coding as a method to solve problems through software will only become more and more mature. 6 months ago, a lot of the apps that are generated by AI, they're just not usable. They're toys. They're just front-end designs. They're HTML files. But fast forward to today, full-stack apps at these vibe coding platforms, they can help you generate. And to the extent you actually are willing to do the last mile, you still can, right? You can still open your app on VS Code or Claude Code and just keep on iterating. Just ask Claude Code, what does it take to push this prototype to production? What is SOC 2? What do I do? And what changes do I need to make to this app to get to a point where it becomes compliant? Not saying that is a complete solution, but then I would say if you're willing to push something to production, you can. And let's not forget that a lot of the frontier labs, they are already using AI to write most of the codes. They don't write codes manually anyway. So to the extent a lawyer can use the same mindset to complete the last mile, then fundamentally, I don't see a huge barrier to actually make these things deployable. The thing is, going back to my point about why did I say the big techs and the frontier labs and also the vibe coding platform, they will solve these issues at scale? It's because I wanted to make the point clear that this could become something that more people can use and have a positive experience with. I hope that legal tech could become a little bit more democratized because of that.
If I could bring us back to an earlier point, which is that Web 1.0 that I grew up in, Didn't look like that by the time you were on the web in your, let's say, teenage years. It probably looked different for you. It probably looked more like walled gardens, closed ecosystems. And I'm wondering if that's a signal for what we might expect to happen with vibe coding and with agentic AI tools and with, frankly, legal tech more generally, especially if it becomes more personalized, customizable. Does this look like something where the trajectory might be a more closed ecosystem because that's what provides all that security? And that's the result of the frontier labs solving all these solutions? Or is there a way to imagine this continuing on more of like an open source situation where there's lots of different tools you can use to support your vibe coding and you're not forced to be on one of three ecosystems to build, deploy, and use these sorts of tools?
That's a really good question. Let's take a step back. When we look at a lot of the latest AI projects that actually get a lot of popularity, including quite recently the OpenClaw project. These are all open source projects. And I think because there is a lot of development in this space to actually make something that actually scales to drive adoption, people have taken a more open source approach. Because if you're not open sourcing your work and you're selling closed source systems, that would definitely put a brake on how many people are using your software. And imagine if OpenClaw was actually closed source in the first place. Would it have gained this much popularity? I don't know. May or may not be. So if we look at all the OCR rates that are out there, handling a lot of the OCR for legal documents, things like Docling, things like Pedal OCR, they also open sourced. So I kind of see precisely because people are competing to build the best AI solutions. People are competing for market share. Open source became like a strategy for some of these companies to scale, or it becomes their go-to-market strategy, which kind of benefits everyone. So I think that in the short term, at least, we benefit from projects like OpenClaw or Dotling to build AI products or vibe code. So I don't know how long it will take for a frontier lab to say that, well, like we've built everything, we are much better than everyone else. I will now close the doors and everyone needs to become a paying customer to use AI. I believe the opposite is true. There are open source models. They are becoming better and better, with GLM 12.7, Kimi, and also Minimax. They are open source models that are really good. That's the model layer, and also the application layer. We're also seeing a lot of open source projects like OpenClaw. So I definitely see open source still maintaining a pretty significant market share.
It wouldn't be the first time we see open source used to drive adoption and then the doors start closing. This is a strategy that exists, but we don't know. We don't know how it's going to play out. But it's interesting you pointed out the model and application layer. So from your perspective, those open source sort of model and application layers, are they getting you to where you need to be when you're vibe coding? And is it lower cost as a result of being open source as well? Walk me through, like, what's the advantage from your perspective as someone who's vibe coding a tool? What advantage does it give you that the model and the application layer are more open source?
Definitely, from a cost perspective, something that's open source, you can simply just use it. I think lowered cost is definitely an advantage. The second thing would be auditability as well, because you also get to see what actually happens in the backend and configure it. Because if something is open source, they can configure to suit your use case. So as an example, I created a tablet review tool. It was forked more than 130 times. And I've different startup founders coming back to me say, well, I forked your tool. It's really useful. I put it into my app and then sold it to different law firms. So thank you so much. One is M&A due diligence startup. One is a more like an information management company. So seeing people actually use it and then customize it, I think that's kind of speaks to why open source is popular, because you can basically just see how the codes work. If it doesn't suit your use case, then you configure it to match what you actually wanted to do. So from a vibe coding standpoint, then having these projects, they serve as a starting point. If you want to design something that matches the use case that you have in mind, but you want something to reference.
So we've covered at least 3 areas where vibe coding has received some questions or criticisms. We talked about security, we talked about scalability, and now we've been talking about what I think of as like sustainability, meaning given cost and resources, is it sustainable for people to do this? Are there any other ways that you think this vibe coding movement is misunderstood or is getting a bad rap? Or I'm just curious, talking to someone who's on the inside of this community, is there anything else that you would want people to understand about what it is and isn't?
Yeah, I want people to understand that legal quants are not software engineers wannabe. So if you compare legal quants with traditional software engineers, then you will find that they are not that qualified. They know little about deployment, about security, about how to get a SOC 2. They don't know how to scale. Not now, I guess. These things could be learned. But then if you think of them as lawyers who use AI, then suddenly the narrative changes, right? These are the lawyers that are extremely good at using AI, and they become the top 0.1% when it comes to AI literacy. So that's how I see it.
Yeah.
They are the lawyers that know how to harness the power of AI and use it on the day-to-day work. So that is the real value of legal quants. It's not that legal quants are lawyers that want to switch lane and become a software engineer and take their jobs. It's not that. It's the other way around. Like, how do we actually solve the problems? Whether it's the end client's problems, the lawyer's own problems, internal workflow problems, they're using the creativity to get there. And AI is just one of the tools that they use. So I would see legal quants as the people that are creative, who are operating at the frontier of AI. And instead of just waiting for the perfect tool to come, they're willing to experiment, tolerate bugginess, and get their hands dirty. And they think from that perspective, they are top tier, lawyers, from my point of view. From a software engineering point of view, of course, it's all the same. But I would say precisely because we are not technically trained, we don't have this perception of what's possible and what's not possible. We assume that everything is possible. That gives us a lot of courage to actually experiment because we don't know what questions not to ask. So we just to try to do everything, right? And we quickly know where the limits are, maybe more so than a software engineer, because a software engineer will tell us that, well, that doesn't work. I've tried this and tried that. But as lawyers don't have that kind of framework, they just let their imaginations run wild. I think that's something that's really precious.
And not everyone is going to be or needs to be at this level of engagement with vibe coding to be a lawyer, right? And so to me, the bigger signal here is not necessarily that every lawyer needs to be figuring out how to vibe code in order to be an all-star associate at a law firm or partner track lawyer. To me, the bigger
Mm,
signal is that legal enterprises, whether that's law firms, whether it's in-house legal corporates, are going to need to figure out a way to tap into these capabilities in some way. What I mean by that is if you can't count on the average lawyer spending their time vibe coding, there's no reason you can't have lawyers identify these sorts of ideas and then have other build capacity in your organization to support them. So if 2 years ago, you might have reached out to a legal operations person and they might have spun up a macro, right? Just to create some simple solution for something that came up in the middle of a litigation.
mm,
There's no reason you can't imagine a situation where that same phone call in that same context leads to someone quickly vibe coding a disposable one-time solution used in the heat of a litigation. And that isn't the lawyer necessarily building that, but someone else at the organization. Either way, the point is organizations that employ lawyers should be thinking about how do you empower your lawyers to be able to do these things, or at least to be able to bubble those ideas up to the top, or be able to identify those needs and then match them to the technical capabilities that you have internally to go out and actually build something.
precisely. Uh, I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that lawyers of the future will have a very different skill set. And one of those skill sets would be definitely AI literacy. And for the past 2 years, we have seen lawyers developing this skill set, but having nowhere to show them. And in the past few months, lawyers are actually coming from Cell to show that, well, actually, I've developed this skill set that I haven't really showed anyone. But since everyone's sharing their own facultative apps, like, why don't I just share mine as well? And right now, this skill set is, to my mind, hugely underpriced, hugely underappreciated. Over the past, 2 years, my bet is these legal quants will do amazing things. And that's why I feel that it's important to bridge that gap as soon, because to my mind, these are the people that would kind of make legal teams more efficient. They will be in the trenches with the fee earners. They will no longer, and they should not be considered as back office roles. And that goes back to my Jane Street analogy that I had when I was writing an article on Substack. At Jane Street, every portfolio manager is accompanied by 5 software developers. I think in the future, it's not going to say that. For legal teams, there will be a legal quant and also a practicing lawyer or a partner. And they will together create things that are half software, half words, and send it to the client.
Yeah. So the enterprises need to understand the value this is creating and in their own way, figure out how do you make sure that you're extracting this value? What kind of roles need to exist? What kind of functions have to be set up? Because if you just sort of leave it to chance, then you might end up in a position where you're not making the best arguments in court, or you're not negotiating the best deal for your client, et cetera. It's a very interesting contribution that you're making in helping people see that value.
Mm,
Because when I think of the arc of these roles internally at law firms, at some point we had what we called litigation support specialists. This is a role that was sort of like the pre-legal operations role or a legal operations adjacent role. But there's that word support right in the middle of the acronym, right? They're seen as support. And what you're describing is not someone that's just support. You're really describing someone that is going to be driving the outcome and driving the value.
I think they will be the rainmakers. Yes, I strongly believe that.
That's
I
interesting.
think I think a lot of the members in our legal quants group, most of them are still practicing lawyers. I think there's a reason for that. They want to be 10x lawyers using that skill. They want to be at the place where they can have the highest leverage. And being a lawyer in the trenches, frontline, it's extremely empowering because you can feel the heat, you sense the urgency, and that's where AI can give you the greatest impact and leverage. Whereas if you're tucked away, trying to think of solutions that lawyers might need, then that's a little bit indirect. So for legal quants, it's different because they're practicing lawyers. They are constantly thinking, how do I use AI to invent new form of legal service, new ways to deliver value? How does lawyering look like in the future? I think that is something that is really valuable because a legal engineer only looks at the inputs and define the outputs and figure out what needs to happen in between. A legal quant is given the inputs and reimagine the outputs. So I think that is something that is a contrarian view of mine.
Are you hearing from younger lawyers or from law students? Are they reaching out to you to ask about this and explore this as a way for them to enter the legal field with different goals or different expectations of how to succeed or what kind of roles to look for?
Yeah, I do have a lot of law students reaching out to me. Maybe they're biased. They want to do legal tech. Law students won't necessarily come to me saying that, I want to do a thesis on jurisprudence, right? So I'm a little bit biased in that sense. I see law students that want to get into legal tech. I wonder whether that's because they see legal services being delivered by tech, or they feel that gives an additional advantage when applying, it could be a combination of different factors. But I would say if I were in law school, if I were a trainee, I would definitely want to use AI as much as possible and get to a point where when a senior tells me to do a research or tells me to do a task, then I can at least give them an output that performs better than the AI. And knowing where the frontier is extremely important because that's something that the senior is expecting. Because the senior themselves, they're using AI and they're expecting that kind of input from the AI. And the expectation only goes higher and higher. And they would expect juniors and trainees and law students, they should outperform AI in a way. It's a high bar these days. It's an extremely high bar. They need to use AI more to know where it falls short and then try to outperform the AI in those areas. So that's how I think about it.
That's a great framing. Junior associates or first year associates are not just there to control an AI chatbot tool. They're there to use that tool to create better work product. I like that. That's a really good framing, Jamie. Thank you for bringing some outside thinking to our field, injecting some tech-driven creativity into our field, and for building a community around it. I think as an industry, we're all going to be better for it.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, that's my mission.
Look forward to following your efforts online.
Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you for having me.